Hi, my name is Billy Sanderson. I really enjoy woodworking. Now, I wouldn't call myself an expert by any means, and I certainly don't have an amazing shop like this one, but I got some tools at the house, and I enjoy making frames for pictures and just using old barn wood. A lot of frames just like this one of my family. And recently I made a frame, and I came down to the glass shop to get a piece of glass to put in that frame. Some frames do, some don't. And when I picked up that piece of glass, I was really careful, and I got it home, I put it in the frame, and wouldn't you know, unfortunately, I dropped it. Well, you know what happens when heavy things hit glass? Unfortunately, that glass shattered everywhere. Well, how do you think I handled it the next time that I went to get a piece of glass? I was extremely careful, and I used a lot of sensitivity, but it didn't mean I never went back. I want to talk to you today about the difference between living in fear and walking in freedom. Because you see, I could have never gone back to get another piece of glass and said, you know what, forget about it. I'm never going to make another frame again because something bad happened. But instead, I learned from that. And it's allowed me to walk in freedom and actually make even more frames, and frames that quite honestly don't use glass like this one. Becoming fearless, that's not the point in this whole thing. It's not. Matter of fact, that's impossible. It's about learning how to control our fears and anxieties so that we can become free in them. A lot of times we look at fear, and if you look at the acronym FEAR, a lot of people call it false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. You got to look at the facts. And the fact was that I made a mistake, and unfortunately, I had a lot of shattered glass. Right now, we're living in a time, in the midst of this global pandemic in the year 2020 with the coronavirus. And quite honestly, there are a lot of people that are afraid. Now, I'm not minimizing that fear by any means, and you know what? Some of that anxiety is real. People have every right in the world to be concerned. People want to be safe and to protect their families, and that's why all of us have had to sacrifice for the greater good. We've had to stay inside. We've had to take extreme measures when going out and doing stuff. At some point, though, we've got to get moving again. At some point, we got to get back down to that glass shop. At some point, we got to pick up that piece of glass again and say, you know what, this time maybe things will be different, but I'm going to get back at it. As fragile as we might think we are, I think humanity has proven throughout the years that we're actually very resilient. Because you see, just like glass, this piece that I use for the example is pretty thin and it's pretty fragile, but there's actually glass called tempered glass that's actually very strong. It's the same kind of glass that's used in automobiles or in airline industry. And do you know how they make that glass strong? They actually apply heat. And when the heat is applied in these furnaces that go over 1,000 degrees, what happens is that the heat and the pressure cause that glass to become extremely strong and resilient. And if we're honest with ourselves, there are many times in our lives that when we face fears and anxieties, but we do so embracing it instead of resisting it, and we get back out there, we become stronger than ever before. And that's what I'm really hoping for us, that we can walk in fear, or, which is just like the real fragile glass, or we can walk in freedom which is like the tempered glass. Our culture, our companies, our communities, they've all been put through the stress and the heat of this pandemic. But the companies and the people that come out the other side stronger are the ones that embrace it. The ones that absolutely embrace it. And they're not afraid to face the fear. Now, unfortunately, I have talked to some business owners recently that you'll find them on all different sides of this whole entire situation. You have some that go to their employees and they're like, you know what? It's your job. Get back out there. You get a paycheck, and so just get back out there. And unfortunately, that's not very good leadership. Because right now, there's anxieties and their fears, and those are real. This, the virus that we're facing it's really real. Unfortunately, there are many people who are understanding the reality that the loss of loved ones, and we can't minimize that, and we shouldn't try to force people just to jump back into things, especially if they aren't safe conditions. But then there are some on the other side that are just like, you know what, I'm never going back out again. I'm never going to go back down to that glass shop. I'm going to shut everything down. But that's not the right response either. And so what do we do? What do we do in the midst of it all so that we can go from having a fear to walking in freedom? How do we allow ourselves to become stronger in the midst of this time of, quite honestly, quite a bit of heat and pressure? Well, let me give you a few ideas around this whole topic. Now, I hope that you don't see these as a hammer coming down. I hope you just see them as some thoughts that maybe can help us help those around us in our spheres of influence. If you're the company leader or manager, or maybe you're the owner, maybe you're in the C-level suite, or maybe you're out on the shop floor like this one. Either way, we're all important, we're all valued, and every single opinion matters. So let's share a couple thoughts together on what it looks like to walk in freedom instead of fear. The first thing I would encourage is to actually face it. Face your fears. That doesn't mean that you have to be unsafe. Doesn't mean that, that you have to take risks that are extreme. But it does mean that at some point, we have to have that gut check, and we have to say, you know what? Just like me, I had to get in my vehicle, and I had to go back down to the glass shop, and I had to get another piece of glass. And I had to be pretty vulnerable with them. Matter of fact, it was right here at this shop where I had to say, you know what? It was my fault. I dropped it, and I need another piece. Sometimes we just got to face those fears. We got to just, you just got to do it. And when you face your fears, what we're doing is we're actually saying, you know what? I'm not allowing you, that situation or the circumstance, to control me. Matter of fact, I'm going to take over and take charge of this situation. Now, I wish that we could take charge of this global pandemic and this virus, and we could come up with a vaccine right now. But in this pre-vaccine time that we're in right now, in the time that this video is being made, we have to face the facts, but we have to do so with respect, and we have to do so with great caution. But face the fear. Face the fear. The second thing I would say is stop waiting. Stop waiting on the anxiety to show up. A lot of times what we do, especially right now, because a lot of people are shut in, or a lot of people are working remote, or we're having to social distance ourselves from others. And then what happens is that fear and the anxiety just builds and builds, and so we just stew in it, and we just wait. And we wait and we wait, and it's almost like we convince ourselves of conspiracy theory, or we convince ourselves that something bad's going to happen. So don't wait. Don't wait on the anxiety to show up. Face the fear. If you need to, do some things that will help you relax a little bit. But don't just sit there and wait on something bad to happen. Because inevitably, even if it's just on your own doing, a lot of times we manifest bad things because we're just waiting and stewing. So Don't do that. And thirdly, a thing that could help you in that is one of the greatest proverbs of old is that laughter is their greatest medicine. It really is. Learn to laugh. Learn to laugh. Maybe you're like me and I had to laugh at myself when I came down here to this glass shop. I was like, you know what? I broke it. Yep, I just did. And unfortunately, I spent time having to clean it up, and here I am to get another one. And I was able to laugh at that. So many times in these moments of pandemic, we take ourselves way too seriously. Now, doesn't mean we don't take the pandemic seriously or the virus seriously. Of course we do. But in the moments that we have, learn to laugh a little bit. Turn on your favorite, comedy, or call someone that you know has a great sense of humor. But in the midst of it all, learn to laugh, because laughter will ease those anxieties and the fears will begin to slowly fade away. Another thing that I would encourage is that if you're having a lot of fear or anxiety, show appreciation to someone else. You see, what happens is when we have an attitude of gratitude and we show appreciation to others, it begins to build us up. That's why the proverb of old says it's better to give than to receive. Give the appreciation, because in doing so, it will build you up and it will actually build your courage. A lot of times what happens is when you give out appreciation, it comes back to you. And when you are appreciated, all of a sudden those fears begin to go away. So show appreciation to people. Show that attitude of gratitude. Another thing to do is to take a break from your stressors. Right now, one of the best things that people can do, honestly, yes, do your research. Yes, find out what the facts really are. But turn off the news. Turn off the source of the stressor, because, we've gotten to a point where a lot of times it's like, who do I believe anymore, right? Everybody says, oh, I believe in science, but one scientist says one thing and another scientist contradicts them, right? And so it's hard to say, who do we believe anymore? And if you're overwhelmed and inundated with that information constantly, of course you're going to live in fear. So stop the stressors. Stop. Whatever it is that causes that fear, that anxiety in you, you got to press pause. You really do. You have to just take a break from it, because unfortunately, what happens is if you feed yourself that garbage all the time, guess what you're going to be full of? Fear and anxiety. Another thing that I think is really helpful during times like this is to keep a routine. Keep a routine. Make sure that your calendar is full of your routine. Because if you get out of a routine, now that doesn't mean that you can't be flexible, right? Or take breaks when necessary. But keep a routine, because in a routine, you have control. And in that control mechanism, what you're doing is basically eliminating opportunities for the fear and the anxiety. So keep your routine going. If it's working from home, make sure that you have a routine there. Make sure that your calendar has on there, the opportunities for you to get your work done. But keep that routine going. But in the midst of that, don't become like I am, a recovering workaholic. You have to be able to separate. And that's another good point, is take the time to unwind. Take the time to unwind. Because what happens is, if you're just constantly focused on work or on this situation or on the pandemic or whatever, if you're constantly focused on that, you're going to become burned out. Now, this is where we have to pause and just recognize and thank those who are on the front lines. It's amazing, to watch these heroes that are out there on the front lines right now who are working tirelessly to keep us safe. And we appreciate that. We really do. That's a debt that we as a country owe to those people for sure. But you got to take the time to unwind. Maybe it's hobbies like building these frames, or maybe it's getting out and going for a walk. Get out into nature and just absorb it, of course appropriately and with social distancing, but make sure that you take the time to unwind. Because if all you're doing is focusing in one area or one direction, it's just going to feed those fears and those anxieties. And then a real great coping mechanism that I've used many times in my life, and I've encouraged countless leaders over the decades that I've worked with C-level suite all the way down to the factory floor in different countries from the Middle East to Latin America to the United States. Take time to pray. Take time to meditate. Take time to just focus in. Because what happens is when we walk in fear and anxieties, what happens is that fear and anxiety it's the silent killer. It actually destroys us from the inside out. And by taking time to meditate and to pause and to pray, whatever it is, you're reflecting and you're centering yourself so that you can focus on what's appropriate and what is a priority. Instead of focusing on that fear and that anxiety, you focus on the things that matter the most. And when you focus on those things and you center yourself, what you're doing is saying, I'm no longer giving this fear and anxiety control over my mind and my soul. I am now making me and my health and my safety and the humanity and the greater good the priority. So take time. Take time to do your hobbies, but also take time to meditate and to pause if you're really walking that fear and anxiety. And finally, there are times that it's absolutely appropriate. And I would encourage you, if you struggle with anxieties or with fear, I would encourage you to reach out for help. Reach out for help. Because no man is an island, and we can't do this alone. So many people struggle with fear and anxiety, and they have this shame complex of, well, if people knew, they would think. But you know what the reality is that when I've gotten those phone calls, or I've gotten those emails, or those 911 texts saying I really need help, you know what that does? It makes me respect that person even more. Because if you're self-aware enough to say, hey, I just need some help right now, right? I'm really struggling with this thing, or it's really got me bothered. I just need to talk to someone, or I need some professional help. Reach out and get it. Because if you don't, what's the alternative? You're just going to keep getting worse. And no one wants that for you. Everyone wants you to be the best version of you possible. And you can't be the best version of you if you're walking in fear, not in freedom. As you walk in the fear, what happens is you become distant with others. You become almost isolated and you start pushing people away and aside. But when you walk in freedom, you begin to encourage others. You begin to collaborate well. You begin to bring the right attitude and joy to the situations around you. And you become contagious for the good. My hope for you is that you will take some of these thoughts and apply them right now, whether it be to your team, whether it be to yourself, or maybe you just need to share this with someone else that is really walking in some fear and anxiety right now. We're all in this thing together. And for the sake of humanity, let's together walk in freedom and take care of our fears.